Welcome to Expand Your Fempire with Caterina Rando, the podcast for women in business on a mission, sharing ideas to support you to grow, lead, and thrive. Now, here's your host, Caterina Rando.
This is Caterina Rando, and I am blissing to be back with you again for another episode of the Expand Your Fempire podcast. Today, we have an amazing, fabulous, super smart guest with us, and her name is Julie Anderson. Julie Anderson is known as the Brain Lady. She helps business owners learn more about how their brain works so that their brain can support them in being super effective in their business. Welcome, Julie. So happy to be with you. And Julie, before we dive into the brain talk, can you give the ladies a little report on you, on your background, how you became the Brain Lady? Let's get to know you a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah. So becoming the Brain Lady. So I started studying neuroscience about 22 years ago. My first introduction to it was on psychoneuroimmunology. So it's this connection between how what you think in your mind affects the chemistry, the actual neural chemistry in your brain, and then how that in turn affects your immune system for the good or bad, depending on what your thought process is. So that just made me get so excited. What else can science tell us or teach us that helps us to understand more about our lives and how to be successful in our lives, whether it's our health, our business. And I just went down the rabbit hole of neuroscience and the brain. And since then, I've taken many, many courses on that application, kind of funneling the information coming from neuroscience and how do we use it to live better lives, better relationships, and build better businesses. And I kind of became the Brain Lady because I had a lot of clients that just started calling me that. So it just kind of naturally flowed. And I became Brain Lady Julie or the Brain Lady. But that kind of came from my clients and people who followed me and listened to me. And it's been a wonderful ride. I love the brain. I love any opportunity to be able to teach on the brain or just share some of the amazing information. So thank you so much, Caterina, for having me here and for giving me that platform to be able to share with some ladies some amazing things to help them be more successful in their life.
Well, you know, that's what we're all about here at the Thriving Women in Business community. Julie, give us some brain basics, if you will. Some information that is, before we even talk about how to be more successful, what are some brain basics, if I can ask that question?
Well, I think when we talk about the best thing to know about your brain is that it is, number one, your best asset that you have in your life. When you are able to tap into the power of the brain and your mind and your cognitive abilities, you are able to achieve so much. So when we're talking about this connection, we're talking about really how everything that goes on in our thoughts, when we're talking to ourselves, when we're communicating with other people, like what's going on in our mind, our consciousness, how that affects the chemistry in our brain, the neurotransmitters, the dopamine, the endorphins, all of these different things that then in turn control the body and control our interaction with other people. So that's kind of just some basics about neuroscience and understanding that what's going on in that brain, that communication across the synaptic gap, all that technical stuff, that all is controlled very largely by our thought process and by what's been ingrained in our subconscious. So those two things control the activity of our brain.
Julie, let's back up and let's define some of those terms you used.
Sure.
Dopamine, whatever else you said, because I know that some people know exactly what you're talking about, but some people don't. So can you define those different terms and how they relate to the brain?
Yeah, so your dopamine, your endorphins, your norepinephrine, these are neurotransmitters which basically communicate information between neurons. They also can act as hormones in the body. Norepinephrine is one of those. It works as both. It can be used for communication in the brain, but it's like part of that adrenaline rush. So there's neurons, there's neurotransmitters, which communicate between those neurons. And it's that communication that creates thought process. It's that thought process is basically just one neuron talking to another neuron. So that's kind of in a nutshell what that's all about. And then the brain pulls together information from your subconscious. So these are kind of your automated systems in your brain, your memory circuits. It will pull all of that information together and merge it with whatever you're experiencing right now in this moment, and create your emotions and create your feelings about what you're experiencing in this moment, because it's connecting past experiences with what you're experiencing. And then that, of course, leads to how you feel or what you're thinking regarding what's going on in this moment.
And can you talk a little bit about some super tips to avoid cognitive decline or keep our brain sharp?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love this. So this is one of the best things that's come out of neuroscience and study of neuroscience, is that just like we can keep our muscles strong by physically exercising, you can keep your brain strong by doing several different activities. One is exercising. Like, literally think about how when you are, for any of you out there who are exercise gurus or exercise people, and you know that by exercising, you're moving toxins out of your body, you're keeping your muscles strong, you're keeping your cardiovascular system strong. Well, at the same time, you're also moving extra oxygen up to your brain, and you're keeping your brain strong. And when you're doing complicated movements in exercise, you are also wiring your brain. You're making your brain think, how do I move my arm to make this move that I'm watching of this person? So exercising is huge. It's great for the brain. Learning new things. Don't ever stop learning. I shouldn't use that word. I don't want to use that word. Always continue learning. Let me put that on a positive. Always continue learning, because every single new thing that you learn creates new neural pathways. And the way I like to explain it is, as you grow old, as time goes on, we lose neural pathways. They degenerate, they die. That's just a part of life. But the more neural pathways you're continuing to add in, then they replace the ones that are dying off. They also give your brain the ability to have multiple roads to get to one thought or memory. So if you want to maintain your memory, look at it this way. If you have one or two neural pathways that are attached to a specific memory, and those pathways get damaged or deteriorate to the point where you can't use them anymore, well, you're not going to be able to access that memory anymore. But if you have 10 different neural pathways that go to that memory and you only lose one or two, hey, you've got 8 spare, right? And the way that you make those neural pathways is by just simply learning new things. It can be a new language. It can be needlepoint. It can be dance. Learn to do pattern dance. It's mastering these different skills, or not even really mastering them, just simply learning them. It creates all of these new paths in the brain that keep the brain young and keep the brain, fresh. It also helps to detoxify. You can watch your diet. Diet is a big thing. There are definitely things that will add to keeping your brain malleable. There's fish, having those essential fatty acids in your diet, fish oils, things like that. They help the brain communicate. The neurons communicate to each other. They help keep the brain young. Things that get rid of the free radicals, that get rid of them in the body, they also get rid of them in the brain. So your dark berries, your blueberries, your blackberries, your raspberries, your colored foods, those are really good for the brain as well. So there are a lot of things, a lot of activities that you can do in your day-to-day life that will keep your brain young and healthy. And when you do a little bit of each, you're going to be just that much further ahead.
And so, Julie, would you say that entrepreneurship is good for your brain because we do such a variety of activities?
Yes and no. So let me give you
give me the report. Give us the report.
Let me give you both. So the creativity the learning new, if you are using that, you're coming up with creative ideas, which most entrepreneurs, because of the way their brains are wired, and they have been able to identify the home of entrepreneurialism in the brain. And for these individuals, they're also the very creative type. So they're always coming up with new creative ideas. And that's wonderful. It helps to keep the brain young when they dive into, okay, how do I make this project become real? Or write this book, right? Go through all the things to write the book or to do the podcast, and you're constantly creating new things. That's all healthy for the brain. What the downside, or the other side that you have to be cautious about, is that entrepreneurs tend to want to do everything. And you need to stay in your lane. You need to stay in your brain strength lane, because if you do not, then you're actually you're causing too much fatigue in your brain, because you're making it work in areas of your brain where you're not gifted in. And therefore, you're spending up to 100 times as much energy to do things. So this is why outsourcing is so important for the entrepreneur. And stay in your lane. That's great for brain health. But if you try to do everything, you're actually going to cause fatigue in your brain.
Brain fatigue. I didn't even know that was a thing, except for working too late at night. Let's talk about brain fatigue, but I also want to talk about the home of entrepreneurialism in the brain. But let's start with brain fatigue.
Yeah, brain fatigue is real. So oftentimes individuals will not realize they're experiencing brain fatigue, but instead they'll think they need sugar, right? They go for sugar. They go for things that, because they're tired, they're fatigued, their brain is foggy, they can't think well. And so often, a lot of times, you'll go for the things that are not necessarily the best for you. But yeah, what happens is when you are, just imagine that you wake up every morning with your brain energy bank on full, right? Now, if you are spending too much brain energy throughout the day and you're not taking care of yourself and refilling that energy bank, then you are going to wind up on brain energy empty. And when this happens, then you get all of those typical stress responses in the brain, and the amygdala kicks in, and all of these crazy things happen. And you wind up not being able to focus, not being able to concentrate. You get frustrated with yourself because this is a simple project. Why can't I get it finished? But you can't. I mean, we've all had that moment when we've gone to do something. It's like, why can't I think? Well, you can't think because your brain is energy fatigued. And so that's when you need to refill that energy bank.
Okay, so when we notice that we're having brain fatigue, what do we do to refill our brain bank?
Okay, first and foremost, I'm going to say get up and move. 9 times out of 10, you're going to feel this fatigue when you've been sitting in front of the computer screen too long, or you've been focusing for too long on one single thought or one single project. It takes a lot of brain energy, and your brain starts to run down. So just simply getting up and moving, breathing, taking some deep breaths, re-oxygenating your brain. Going from a sitting to a standing position alone is going to increase the oxygen level in your brain by 10 to 15%. So that's why I always tell my ladies, look, ladies, do not sit for longer than 30 minutes. Set a timer. If all you do is get up, turn on your funky music and dance for 2 minutes, that is going to help you come back to your project so much more brain refreshed, because you just refilled your brain energy bank to a certain extent. Another thing is to really understand that there are some things that are just going to be more labor intensive for your brain. When we talk about our brain strengths, these are areas where, according to current scientific research, based on PET scans, functional MRI scans, there are areas of the brain that we spend up to 1/100th the amount of energy to work there. So it's real easy for us, right? It just kind of flows. But when we work outside of that energy area, it can take up to 100 times as much energy. So it's the difference between powering a 1 to 10 watt light bulb and a 100 watt light bulb, a lot more energy. So you have to do things then that are going to refill your energy bank, whether that's moving or doing something that you really enjoy creatively that's going to refill it. So if you've got to do a bunch of editing on your podcast description or on your newsletter that you're sending out, you don't have that outsourced. That's going to take a lot of brain and energy for the entrepreneur. So do that for a short amount of time, and then go do something that's going to re-energize you, and then come back to that labor-intensive task once you've refilled that energy bank, once you've moved, once you've hydrated. Most people do not realize they are dehydrated. And just a 2% drop in your body water, 2% can cause you difficulty focusing on a computer screen, difficulty doing basic math and basic spelling. And so a lot of people don't even realize they're thirsty or they're dehydrated at that point. So make sure you're well hydrated. Lots of these different things will help to refill that energy bank. And sometimes it means just take a 30-minute break, just get away from your project and just go do something fun for a little bit. We sometimes forget to do something fun, or we think, no, my work is fun. Well, come on. Sometimes your work is work. So go do something fun for 30 minutes and then come back to the project.
Julie, I love that. And I think that we can all apply those tips. Okay, Julie, I'm so curious. Talk about the center of entrepreneurship in the brain.
Yeah, so this is so fascinating. Again, a lot of this is coming out of research where they've scanned the brain, the energy expenditure in the brain, on what's called positron emission tomography scans, so PET scans. And what they discovered was that the home of entrepreneurialism is in the front right quadrants of the brain. Now, what's very interesting is the front right quadrant of the brain is also the quadrant of the brain that is responsible for out-of-the-box thinking, for abstract thinking, abstract art, abstract thoughts. The front right portion of the brain is always forward moving. It's always thinking and creating new things. Very innovative. This is also the home of innovation, is in the front right portion of the brain. So that's why your entrepreneurs are very forward-thinking people. They're very creative. They do things that are new and innovative because they're all housed in that same portion of the brain where the home of entrepreneurialism is, in that front right quadrant.
Okay, now, Julie, I've heard you talk about the quadrants of the brain before. This is very interesting. And can you explain a little bit about all of that?
Sure. So there's different quadrants in the brain that are divided naturally by fissures in the brain. The most obvious is the right and left hemisphere, right? So there's that fissure that goes down the middle of the brain that separates. So you've got right hemisphere, left hemisphere, but then you also have a natural fissure that divides the front quadrant of the brain, or the frontal lobes of the brain, with the posterior lobes of the brain, or the back lobes of the brain. So that creates 4 main quadrants, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. And this is coded in your DNA. You are naturally gifted, according to current scientific research. Obviously, everybody in the world has not been scanned, but based on the scans and the research that they have done, each individual is gifted in one of those 4 quadrants, meaning that they spend up to 1/100th the amount of energy to process a cognitive thought or to process work in that quadrant, or doing the tasks that take place in that quadrant. So I like to illustrate this way, and it's a little bit hard to do it because it's kind of a visual thing, but if everybody can follow me, it'll help you understand what I'm talking about. So if you clasp your hands in front of you, where all your fingers are intertwined, where you're just kind of like hold your hands together. Now, some people have the left thumb on top like me, and some people will have the right thumb on top. Really doesn't matter. It's not a sign of intelligence one way or the other. It's just the way your brain told your hands to fold. And it does it naturally. You don't think about it. You just automatically put your fingers like that. Now, if you flatten your hands out, palms together, flatten your hands out, switch all those fingers so now they're intertwined with the opposite thumb on top. How does that feel? It doesn't feel as comfortable. It doesn't feel as good. Another way you can do it is folding your arms like you're mad. Some people will have the right arm on top. Some people will have the left arm on top. Again, it doesn't matter which one you do. But now if you flip them and you try to put the opposite arm on top, how easy is that for you? How does that feel? Chances are it's awkward. It takes more thought. And every single thought takes energy expended in the brain. So the way you automatically fold your hands, the way you automatically fold your arms, you don't even think about it. It doesn't take any energy in the brain because that's the way your DNA is wired your brain to be, and it just flows naturally. But to do it the opposite way, you have to think about it. You have to tell your hands fold this way or tell your arms fold that way. That takes extra thought, and extra thought means what? Extra energy. So this helps us to understand that there are natural areas throughout our body. We have one eye that's stronger than the other, one ear that's more dominant than the other. It's the same way in your brain. You've got 4 main quadrants, and one of those 4 quadrants is your dominant quadrant. And in that quadrant, that's where you fold your hand. That's where it takes the least amount of energy. And this is closely connected to your personality. That's why I call it your brain personality connection, because there are different tasks that take place in different quadrants of the brain. So when you're being innovative, when you're thinking outside of the box, you're using the front right quadrant of the brain. When you're being entrepreneurial, you're using the front right quadrant of the brain, which means you're not spending hardly any energy to work there if that is your home, because those tasks just naturally are connected to your personality. But now to use other portions of the brain, it might take up to 100 times as much energy. It's like folding your arms the other way, folding your hands the other way. That's not your natural brain way of doing it. And that can be very labor intensive for the brain.
And so that's why we want to delegate.
That exactly. Bing, bing, bing.
Yay.
Exactly. Because like you write a book, you come up with this beautiful idea for a book. You dump all that brain information, all that information for the book down on a piece of paper, right? Or into the computer or whatever. Well, now it has to be edited. Editing takes details. Details in the brain are tracked in the back left part of the brain. So if you're standing over the top of a brain and you're looking down, your home, most entrepreneurs, because that's the home of entrepreneurialism, your home is in this top right portion of the brain. The details to spelling is housed in the back left portion of the brain. Understanding language is in the back left portion of the brain. Tracking money, time, all in the back left portion of the brain. So for you, you have to go all the way around the brain to get back to that back portion of the brain. It is the furthest away from where your home is, which means it takes up to 100 times as much energy to work back there. So it takes you 100 times as much energy as somebody who is gifted there to edit your book, to make sure everything's spelled right, to make sure the grammar is right. So that's why you outsource. You hire somebody who has their home, has their natural giftedness in that back portion of the brain, and let them do it because it's easy for them, where it is difficult for you.
Very, very interesting. Okay, Julie, give us a few super tips for how we can utilize, embrace, thrive more with our brain.
Ooh, I love this. You have to become very comfortable with the portions of your brain that are your natural brain strength. And you must stop criticizing yourself harshly for the areas that take 100 times as much energy. When I first learned this information about 18 years ago, this portion, I was studying the psychoneuroimmunology before that. That's what started it 22 years ago. But I learned this portion of the information about 18 years ago. When I walked away from that first course that I took, it was like a weight off of my shoulders, because all of a sudden I realized this is why I hate doing the books in the office. This is why I hate running my husband's office. I'm not a bookkeeper. My natural brain gift is this innovator, big picture thinker. And once a week, I'm a very mean person because I have to go into the office and I have to track all these details and balance the books and do all this filing stuff that is so labor intensive for my brain. And instead of getting mad at me, getting mad at myself and being critical of myself, like, this is simple stuff. Why can't I balance this checkbook? Why is this so hard for me to do? I stopped saying that then, because all of a sudden it was like, oh, that's just the way my brain's wired. That's just the way I fold my hands. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Not a single thing wrong with it. It's just the way my brain's wired. So when you understand and you become intimately connected to what your natural brain gifts are, you begin to embrace those things and stop beating yourself up for the things that are not your natural brain wiring. There's nothing wrong with it if you're bad with spelling. There's nothing wrong with it if you're late all the time. If you're late all the time, I've got tips for you that'll help you to track the time. We can work with that, but begin to be easy on yourself. I'm not saying be late everywhere. There are, like I said, there's tips for that, but at least don't get mad at yourself for it. At least don't beat yourself up for it as if there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. That's just the way your brain is wired. So you embrace that. You embrace that. And then you learn those little tips, like I said, about re-energizing the brain. So now that you know this, you know, okay, all right, this is a harder task for me to do. So instead of just wearing my poor brain out, I am going to do these little tips that I just heard the brain lady tell me. And I'm going to re-energize my brain so that I can live more comfortably with my brain, embrace my brain natural gifts as it is, and learn to work with those and manage those in a way that's not just going to make me happy. It's going to make people happy that I'm around. I'm going to be more effective in whatever my position is, my job, my relationship, my creativity. I'm going to embrace that.
You know, Julie, I have to say that I've been told that people that are always late, that they're very optimistic, that they expect that everything's going to go great, which is why they are a little bit late, because things don't always go as smoothly as people anticipate getting from point A to point B.
How I like to explain it,
Tell, please.
Is so think about there's a bunch of details, right? Our brain, the details are in the back left portion of the brain, hardest place for the innovator to get to, takes the most energy. So typically what happens is we go, okay, I have an appointment at 4:30. It is 30 minutes from my house. Therefore, logically, I need to leave at 4, right? That's kind of no-brainer. I need to leave at 4. So then what do? 4 o'clock, the alarm goes off. It's 4 o'clock. We got to leave, and we go to the door, and we go, oh, wait a minute. Where's the keys to my car? Wait, okay, got to go find the keys. Oh, wait a minute. Wait, where's my glasses? And you spend another 3 minutes trying to find your glasses, only to realize they're sitting on top of your head. And then you're like, oh my goodness, I'm still in my slippers. I got to go put my shoes on. So I go put my shoes on. Then I go out to the car. I get in the car. I turn the car on. And as I'm backing it out, it's like, oh my goodness, wait a minute. I'm on empty. I now have to go get gas. Right? It's all of these little details that our brain doesn't take into consideration because that's not our strength. We don't track the details. So that's why I always tell people, if you think it's only going to take you 30 minutes, plan at least an extra 15 minutes so that you can find your shoes, you can find your glasses, and you can get gas in the car and still arrive on time.
I love that. And, you know, and Julie, I also love what you said about, you know, we don't all have gifts in everything. And for us to realize, like, I guess I would qualify as an innovator, that, you know, details are not my strength. So I have people on my team that is their strength. And I also don't make myself wrong for not being on top of every little detail, because that's not my gift. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that is a unique challenge for women. I'm not knocking our male counterparts, but there is this societal expectation that leads us to have a self-expectation to be able to be everything to everyone all the time. And when we set that bar for ourselves, we are literally trying to work outside of what our natural brains are capable of doing. So we wear the crud out of ourselves. And then we beat ourselves up because we did not accomplish these things that we felt or that society felt, or these expectations that were placed on us, without taking all of this neuroscience into consideration. So then the psyche gets involved, right? Then that little voice inside your head starts saying, what's wrong with you? This was a simple task. You should have been able to do it fine. It's not that hard. Or you should have been able to stay on track. I should have been able to stay on schedule. I should have been able to get everything accomplished. What's wrong with me? So now our thought process shifts to negative. And we start beating ourselves up for things that are just connected to our natural wiring, as opposed to embracing it and going, you know what? I just bit off stuff that was outside of my brain strength area, and I'm moving on, right? Taking that negative out of it is so, so important for women, I feel, especially.
Very, very much so. Very much so. Beautiful. Julie, do you want to give a quick few super tips to recap?
Sure. Everything was the neuroscience. So it's all about how to keep your brain healthy. So movement, learning new things, always learn new tasks. You don't have to master them, but just learn new things, because every new thing that you learn, whether it's language, music, needlepoint, it doesn't matter. Dance is huge, actually. Learning line dances or pattern dances, very, very big in keeping your brain young. So do different things every day to keep your brain young, constantly learn, hydrate, movement, exercise, eating the deep berries and the fish, things like that, to keep for your brain health. And then really embracing your natural brain gifts. So what your natural brain wiring is, and embracing that and working very hard to not beat yourself up for the things that you're not good at. You don't have to go spend thousands of dollars on courses to teach you things that are not your natural brain gifts. You'd be better off to spend hundreds of dollars on things that are going to help you embrace your natural brain gifts and embrace those and live comfortably within those, because that way you're conserving your brain energy and you're keeping your brain energy bank full. And stop beating yourself up for the things that it's just not the way your brain is wired. And that's okay. That's just the way it is.
And that's so important. It's so important for us as women to recognize what we're good at naturally and to get support for the rest. That's going to bring us a lot more ease and bliss in our business and our life. My friends, let me encourage you all to make sure that you take a look at Julie's website. You can connect with her if you'd like to attend some of her workshops. Julie's also the founder of the Women's Entrepreneur Extraordinaire women's business group that you can connect with. And for those of you that don't know, I'm Caterina. I'm founder of the Thriving Women in Business Community and Center in San Francisco. But now we, of course, serve women all over the country. And please connect with me as well. Thank you again, Julie. And thank you, everyone, for being with us today for the Expand Your Fempire podcast. By the way, if you have not looked at CaterinaRando.com/events, please go there and join me for one of my upcoming free workshops. Also, make sure you have downloaded the Expand Your Fempire app and joined our Thriving Women in Business Facebook group. I would love to connect with you. Find me on Clubhouse. I'm here to support you to grow, thrive, and bring your massive value. Talk to you next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Expand Your Fempire with Caterina Rando.